Okay, let's get started. Ein Soilim, this is a mission that we had already that talks about how even Beis Hill agrees that there are limitations to what you're allowed to do on Shabbos because if you're in a situation where you might stoke the flames, that's not allowed. Ein Soilim Basar Batsalabay, you're not allowed to roast on the flame. And the Gemara learned earlier that it was talking about an open flame right on coal, so therefore even Rav Yirmiyah Midifti agrees that you have to be geyser, that someone might stoke the flames. Unless we're sure that it will be fully roasted by the end of the day before Shabbos. Let me just double check to make sure I got my names right. Now that Mechi's here, I'm afraid that he's going to remind me that I made a mistake on the name. Rav Ashi Shari Rav Yirmiyah Midifti Osir. So I was actually wrong. It's Rav Ashi who holds that it's mutter without any type of shmir. Even the barcha, the loy shark, he said was mutter to him. So even according to Rav Ashi, who's mater, and not too worried about shemiyechta, but if it's on an open flame and it's an open barbecue, we're for sure worried that you might play with the coals. So you have to make sure that this roasting is completed by Shabbos. Ein noiten pas latamer in chashev. You're not allowed to put bread in the oven. So they used to just slap the pitas onto the wall of the oven. You're not allowed to do that before nightfall. And if it's a biscuit, you can't put it on top of coals, which is how they bake those. Unless it would form a crust, the boja. And I guess that meant it was far enough along in the baking process that there would be no longer a worry that someone would try to hasten the baking process. The bottom part should become crusted, and the Gemara is going to drill down to understand exactly what that means. Relevant as an obvious question we brought down from the Rifah, I think. Didn't we learn that it's usher to take bread out of the oven on Shabbos? Right? Remember we had that shiloh before that if someone put it in the oven, are you allowed to be over the Rabbanan to take it out of the oven, so you shouldn't be mechuyev for baking it? So what's this whole shiloh here? If you're allowed to put it in before Shabbos, you can't take it out anyway. It's just going to burn in there. So the Rishonim explained that there's other ways to get bread out of the oven without doing the malacha of Ridiyas Apas. Now, I don't know exactly how Ridiyas Apas was done. They used some type of shovel to get it out. But if you could just scrape it out with a knife, that would not constitute Ridiyas Apas. That would be an approved and a kosher method of taking the bread out of the oven. Or alternatively, if it gets fully baked, it might just fall off the oven, fall off the wall, and then you can grab it that way. So the main point is there are ways to get bread out of the oven without doing the malacha, or it's not the malacha, without doing the act of Ridiyah. Next, Mishal Shulim is a Pesach with Tamer im Chashev. Imagine Erev Shabbos is also Erev Pesach. So we prepare the karbonos on Erev Pesach, and now before nightfall you want to get your lamb, that's your Korban Pesach, cooked for the Seder. So you're allowed to lower it down into the oven. I guess they hung it on some type of chain. They suspended it in the oven. We're allowed to do that right before Shabbos. And there's no chashash shemiyechta. So we're going to soon see why is it that by the Korban Pesach, even though in normal meat there would be an issue of shemiyechta, by the Korban Pesach there was no chashash of shemiyechta. And umachizing is ar b'medur space unlikely. So the way Rashi learns is, we learned in Midas that in the Beis HaMoed, which is one of the lishkos on the north side of the Azara, the Kohanim had a flame there, a bonfire there to warm themselves. They walked around barefoot on the marble floor all day. They got cold. So they would come there to warm up. So before Shabbos, they were allowed to start that fire, kindle that fire, so that they'll have warmth all Shabbos long. Uvekvulim, and not in the Beis HaMikdash, just in a private place, in a private home, could only have a fire prepared, like a little fire prepared. It's only if most of the bonfire is lit up already, so that you don't have to worry that some of the fire's going to go out and you're going to try to fan it up. If you were lighting coals and not just pieces of wood like fuel, coals always take the flame much better. Therefore, even if you just started lighting it a little bit, we know for sure all of the coals will eventually get ignited and will burn, and there's not such a chash of shamayach. Zaktumar the camel. Not that we say that ain toilen basar batzal unless it's finished with vajayim. Well, what is considered completely cooked? The chama, how far along does it have to be that you can allow it to stay on the flame over Shabbos? Amar Abelazar Marav, Kadeshi Yitzoilu mi ba'ojoin, so that it should be fully roasted by day. What does fully roasted mean? Kamachal bren disroy, like machal bren disroy. Rashi tells us that Ben Disroy was listimoya. He was a gangster, so he was always on the run, and therefore mavashol bishulay shlish. He could not allow his food to be more than a third cooked because he had to always be on the run. He had to always be on the move. There's other shittas to learn, like the Rambam, that machal ben yisori means halfway cooked. And of course, that'll be a big chumrah. Okay, Itmar Nami, Amar of Asi, Amar Berechanon, Kol Shahu Kamachal ben yisori, if something is 1/3 of the way cooked, Ein boy mishum bishulay. So here you have the same shaila. Bishulakum. How much cooking does the guy have to do to now asher the food al bishul nachem? If the guy cooked it up to 1/3, that would then passel the food. But on the flip side, if a Jew cooked it 1/3, then it could no longer be passel for bishulakum. So if a Jew cooks it the first third, even if a guy comes and continues the cooking, it would not asher the food. Tanya Chananya says, Kol shehu k'machal ben drusoi mutur lashoisoi al gabe kira. Anything that's at the point where it's a third cooked, you're allowed to let it be on the kira. So now we're not talking anymore about something roasting on an open flame. Now we're talking about something in a pot. If it's cooked 1/3 of the way, you're allowed to leave it on the stove. The afalpi shen grufu ktuma, even though you haven't covered over the ashes, covered over the coals, or shoveled out the coals. So we actually paskin like this. Halacha we paskin like Chananya, and that's why we're allowed to leave a pot of soup on the stove Friday night, even without a blech. Although there are those that are machmer, like the Chachamim, who argue on Chananya, that we'll learn later on, and the Chachamim hold you need gruf and ketuma even if it's kamachal ventureside. But we are makel. Zok tehele the Gemara weiter. Ein noisness a pas. You're not allowed to put the bread in the oven unless it's nikrim will come out, and the Lozer says the bottom has to be nikrim. So the Gemara wants to know Yiboilu tachtoin. What does a Rebbe Lozer mean? Why do we care to know so much about Rebbe Lozer shita? The answer is pretty simple, because we know Rebbe Lozer and the Chachamim were arguing, and we pass like the Chachamim. So there's only two places where we could be talking about that has to get crusted. Either the top of the bread that's facing the oven, that's stuck to the oven, or the lower surface of the bread that's in the airspace that's going to be closest to the flame. If whatever Rebbe Lozer holds, the Chachamim holds the other way. So Tosh is telling us we're probing to understand Rebbe Lozer so that we can understand what the Chachamim hold, and that's who we pass them on. So let's see what the Gemara probes. Tachton, that Rebbe Lozer says that the tzad tachton has to be crusted. Is that heich the gabitaner? Is that the part that sticks to the wall? Oidilma, or maybe it's tachton heich the gabayaor. It's the part of the bread that's facing the airspace of the oven, which is really it has the highest exposure to the flame. Toshma, Rebbe Lozer Aimer Kadesh Yirkmu Panel Hamadu Bokin Bitan. So Rebbe Lozer elsewhere in the Brisa makes it very clear that the part that has to get crusted is the part that's touching the oven, meaning even that part which gets crusted later, according to Rebbe Lozer, has to be crusted. So according to Rebbe Lozer, the bread has to be in the oven longer before Shabbos before we can allow it to remain in the oven on Shabbos, which tells us by default that the Chachamim that argue on Rebbe Lozer hold that it's enough if the side of the bread that's facing the opening of the oven, that's facing the fire, if that gets crusted. So we pass like a chum, which means we would be makel and hold that even if the surface of the bread that's facing the fire, even if only that part gets crusted, it's enough to allow the bread to remain in the oven. So to Hela the Gemara Vayter. The Shalshon was the Pesach, you're allowed to dangle the Pesach down in the oven in order to cook it, to roast it for the Seder. My time. Why are you allowed to? No, never else are you allowed to. We have the Chash of Shem Yechta. So the Gemara Mishum to B'nei Chabura is reasoning. When you're making a Korban Pesach, you're not by yourself, you're with a Chabura. And since everyone's working together on this Korban, we trust that they'll watch each other and they will not allow anyone to be playing with the coals. Are you telling me that without this special shmira of the B'nei Chabura, we would not allow you to leave a piece of meat in an oven? But for Amar Mar, we learned on Yud Ches Amud Beis, Gedi, if you're talking about a lamb, a small goat, a small lamb, which is exactly what the Korban Pesach is, which gets damaged if it becomes exposed to air, well then Bein Sharik, Bein Loy Sharik, Shapradami. There is no Cheshash Shemiyechta because nobody's going to open up that oven to play with the coals because the air is going to ruin the meat. Zakta Gemara, you're right. But Hasa Mintach, the type of meat that will get ruined if it's exposed to air is only if it's cut into pieces. That's much more exposed. And that's where there's a Cheshash. But Hachal Mintach, the Korban Pesach, we actually roast it whole. Since it's roasted whole, it's not as susceptible to being damaged by exposure to air. And therefore, there would be a cheshash of shemiyechta if not for the fact that you're part of a chabura and each one is going to watch each other, not to be machta b'chol. Okay, let's see the next shtickle. Ubachizin esor. You have to get, if you want to sit around the bonfire, you have to get the fire started. How do you know that you're allowed to light up by Medur Space Amoitim, the Beis Hamikdash? How do you know that you're allowed to do it there? Omer Rafuna says, now right off the bat, we have to stop and ask. This is a shayla with the Rabbanim. The whole Gzeira of Shemiyechta is a Rabbanim. So what do we mean, Hanamili? We're looking for a Makar in the Pasuk regarding a Rabbanim the Gzeira. So the answer is we're looking for somewhere where it shows that there's a distinction when it comes to things in the Beis Hamikdash where you can be megal. So Amar Afuna, it says Le'sivayu eish b'chol moish v'seich. The prohibition of making fire is only in your personal places. B'chol moish v'seichem i'atamavir. Aval atamavir b'meduras Beis Hamikdash. You are allowed to make fire in the meduras Beis Hamikdash. Well, that seems to say that midiraisa, there's no isur malacha to make a new fire in the meduras Beis Hamikdash. Matzkov lo Rav Chisda, Yihachi afilu b'Shabbos nami. If you're bringing me a pasuk to tell me that you're allowed to make a fire lechatchila in the meduras Beis Hamikdash on Shabbos, because the Torah is saying that making fires in the Beis Hamikdash is exempt, well then why are we discussing lighting a fire before Shabbos in the meduras Beis Hamikdash? Even on Shabbos you should be allowed to.
Sorry, Yosy. Sorry, Moish V'seichem, isn't that plural?
Yeah.
So why is that referred to a yachid then? Why can that be?
Because your own personal homes. In all of your own personal homes, you're not allowed to make a fire. But in the communal home of the Beis Hamikdash, there you would be able to make a fire. So the Gemara says, Ella Amar Rav Chisda Kura Ki Asa, that we have a pasuk that's exempting the Malach of Shabbos from the Beis Hamikdash, that's Lemishri Evarim U'Ketor Mudasa. There, you're allowed to add fuel to the fire on the mizbeach when you're burning the Evarim and the Ptorim of the Karbonis. But Avada, you're not allowed to. The Torah is not referring to that you're allowed to make a fire in the meduras Beis Hamikdash so that the Kohanim could warm themselves. That's not at all what the Torah is exempting from the Isser of Havarim b'Shabbos. So the reason why Kohanim are allowed to set up that fire before Shabbos, even though in your personal house you wouldn't be allowed to, is because Kohanim's reasoning. Again, Kohanim are very geshik. They're on top of the situation. And Kohanim, we're never worried, are going to be nichshel in being mechata b'chalim, and therefore we let them prepare a flame for themselves before Shabbos, and we're not worried that they're going to kindle it better on Shabbos. Zog to Gemara weiter.
Just before you go weiter, Yosy, Whoever's joining over the phone, if you could just mute your phone unless you have a question. Thank you.
Okay. Zog the Heilige Gemara weiter. When you want to make a bonfire and have a fire that you can sit around to keep warm, Friday night, you have to make sure that the fire is techois beruba. It grabs the roiv. Now the Gemara drills down to see exactly what that means. My ruba. What does a roiv mean? Omarav, roiv kol echad ve'echad. Every single individual log that is part of that fire, roiv of that log has to be on fire. Shmuel Amar, Kedei shelo yoimru havei eitzim v'neniach tachtei. It doesn't mean that every single log has to be right on fire. It just means that the fire has to have caught enough that no one's going to say, oh, you know what, I need some kindling wood, some small pieces of wood to put underneath this log to get it going. As long as there's no concern that any of the flame is going to go out, and we're at the point where we're pretty sure that the flame is going to encompass all of the wood, all of the logs, at that point, you could leave it for Shabbos. Taner Abchia, l'siyur l'shmuel. L'siyur l'shmuel. Abchia brought a brisa that's a right to Shmuel. And Arshko speaks out, it's a little unusual that Abchia, who was way before Shmuel, is going to bring a brisa to support Shmuel. So he says, could be, the Gemara is just putting it together. It's really just a brisa that Abchia learned that the Gemara is stelling to the Shmuel. And he said, it's Kedei Shetehei Shalheves Oila Me'elel, V'loi Shetehei Shalheves Oila Ayidei Davar Acher. It has to be fired up enough that we know that it's going to light up by itself. Now, this here, Rashi says in one shot, is actually referring to the menorah, and it says that when the kohen lights the menorah, he has to hold his candle at the wick there long enough where the flame is already going up by itself on the wick that he's trying to light. But it doesn't need any more help to continue staying ignited. So similarly, by our wood, we also have to be at a point where the flame will continue on by itself. Now that's in the case of a bonfire. We have multiple logs. But what about Eitzichi? What if I have one log in a fireplace? How encompassed with flame does that one log have to be allowed to leave it to continue to burn on Shabbos? Rav Amar Roiv Avyav. Rav holds roiv of the thickness of the log has to be penetrated with fire. For Amrilah, there are those who say the thickness of the log does not have to be penetrated with fire, as long as the outside, roiv of its outer surface, is burning. That would be good enough, which is not as much as when the fire is actually penetrating into the wood. Amar Papa Hilchach, since we have a suffix over here, we have a machlokes, we require both. You mean that the outside surface should be encompassed in flames most of the way, as well as the flame has to penetrate the log thoroughly. The Gemara wants to say that this shiloh that we had here is also a subject of a machlokes tonight. Abchia says, and the Aleph tells us, Ad sheyishachitz ha'etz mimelechus olim. Until the log is so penetrated with flame that even if you put it out at that point, you would no longer be able to use this wood to form anything out of, because it's already ruined, because it's burnt to the core. You don't have to wait that far, as long as the fire has encompassed the wooden log on both sides, that would be enough that you could allow it to remain burning for Shabbos. Even though we don't have a bona fide raya to this, we do have a pasuk that seems to say that if it's just burnt on the outside, that's considered thoroughly burnt, because the Navi was talking about, says Melech. Oh no, it's not this one, it's base. It's v'hine la'esh nitan la'achla eshnei kutzaisav achla ha'esh v'soichei nachar hayitzlach l'melacha. So we're saying if you have a wood, it's thrown in. This is talking about Klal Yisrael. The Navi was comparing Klal Yisrael to a vine, a bad grapevine that's on fire, showing that it's pretty useless. So it says if if both sides of this log was already burnt, and therefore the inside we also realize is toast. Can this ever be any good for any type of malacha? Of course not, because at that point the piece of wood is completely ruined. Now that's talking about a bad grapevine that doesn't produce pears. We're talking about logs, so it's not really a direct raya, but it's just illustrating that once something is burnt, once a piece of wood is burnt all over on the outside, we assume that the inside is fully penetrated and ruined as well. But the more said it's a zeichel, it's not a raya. Okay, this is a very, very fascinating story. So let's look at this pasuk over here. Melech Yosy, Beis HaChorif, the king, and this is King Yehoyakim, who was around by the Churban. He was sitting Beis HaChorif, the Chodesh HaTshi, and the Ach was in front of him, and there was a burning bit. The Gemara can tell us there was some burning aromas. Now this is a fascinating story. What happened is Hashem gave the nevuah to Yirmiyahu about Churban Bayis, and he was trying to deliver that message to the king. The king rejected it. He refused to listen. He didn't want to hear about the Churban Bayis. He didn't want to see Megillas Eicha. The nevuah that Hashem gave to Yirmiyahu to deliver to Yehoyakim was Megillas Eicha, and the king rejected it. He refused to take it. So the Navi tells us a fascinating story where Yirmiyahu was in lockup. I assume the king locked him up in jail because he didn't want him to say his nevuah. So Yirmiyahu got a hold of a sefer by the name of Baruch ben Neriah, and he tells him that I need you to write down this entire message, and I need you to wait for a day where all of Klal Yisrael gathers together, like on a fast day, and then I need you to publicly read this and publicly warn the nation and the king that they're staring down the barrel of a Golas gun, and they better do tshuva. And what happened is when it was read to a sefer who was going to write it down by the name of Gemaryo ben Shaphan. And in the pasuk in Yirmiyah, if you look up this Navi, you'll see that when Baruch ben Neriah was reading it, he was reading it in front of a sefer by the name of Gemaryo ben Shaphan. And apparently the Gemaryo ben Shaphan would have written down the scroll and wrapped it up and brought it to the king. I took a tour of the city of David when I was in Israel last, and they found a seal, a clay seal that belonged to Gemaryo ben Shaphan. So they're postulating, they're guessing that in that city of David, that's where the king was. So it's possible that that's the place where Gemaryo ben Shaphan's letter, his scroll, where he wrote down Megillas Eicha, that's where it was actually given to the king, and the king took it and threw it into the fire because the king didn't even want to read it. So that's one of the most historical finds they made, is they found the seal of Gemaryo ben Shaphan. So let's see what happened there. He had this burning bush in front of him, the king. Mevaeris was burning. What is ach? Omarav achvana. Rashi tells us that achvana is a rava. So he had a little bush of burning aravis in his chambers. Shmuel said, it's eitzim shenidlu b'achvana. It's a whole bunch of pieces of wood that were tied together, wood that are tied together in a bundle. And Rashi says, "Ba'achva kol eitzim nidlakin zemizeh akatan matlav." When you have a whole bunch of wooden twigs together, they light up each other. Ahuda Amar Lahu, there was a person who was announcing, Man boy achvana, who wants to purchase achvana? Ishtakach, after analyzing what this guy was actually selling, arvasa, it was arabas. So that tells us that achvana means arabas. Amar Avhuna, kanim, if you have reeds, ein trichin roiv. If you have just a whole bunch of reeds sitting on the floor and you light them up, you don't need roiv because we know they burn easily, and once one reed gets on fire, it's going to spread the fire to the other ones. But Ogdon, if you tie them up in a bundle, and now Rashi says it's not so easy for air to get in between the pieces, and since they're bundled tightly together, the flame will not spread as easily. Shrichen roiv, there, if you want to let it stay burning on Shabbos, you have to make sure that the roiv of the bundle is already ignited. Garinin, if you have individual seeds, like they would take date seeds and use them as fuel, ain't shrichin roiv. Again, you don't need roiv as long as some of the seeds are on fire, the flame will spread to the rest. But nosam b'choislos, if you put them in baskets, so now they're sort of bundled together, then shrichin roiv, then you need that roiv of them got on fire before you can leave them burning. Maskef Lora Pchista, Frank of Pchista, Adarabba. I would argue the opposite. Ibcham Estaber. Kanim Mivadron, if you just have kanim on the floor, they fall apart. So just because one's on fire, it won't necessarily spread the flame to another reed because they're falling apart and staying away from each other. And the flame from one might not actually reach the next one. But Agdon, if they're tied together, then Loimivdura. Then they're not going to separate. So then if one does get ignited, it will spread to the rest. So I say it's the opposite. That you need roiv only if they're not bundled. If they're bundled, you shouldn't need roiv. But the same with garinin, mivadron, then it won't spread. If they're separated, they won't spread because they might separate far enough apart from each other that the flame from one might not catch the other. But nasab choslos, if they're bundled together, then lemivdron, and then since they're all contained together, surely the flame will spread from one to the next. Itmernami, we learned another shita that also disagrees with these two shitas. Amar Rav Kahana said, Kanim sha'avdan, if you're dealing with reeds, trichin roiv, you'll need roiv. Why? Because we're afraid, exactly like the Gemara said earlier, is that we're afraid that the flame will not spread. But loyagim, if you didn't tie them, ain't trichin roiv, because then we assume the flame will spread. We had a svara that they fall apart and the flame from one might not reach the other one. That Rashi says, since reeds are bigger and heavier, they won't spread. They'll stay in their spot, and in fact, one that's on fire will spread to the next one that'll get on fire. Garinin, shrichin roiv. Garinin, individual ones do need roiv because we're afraid that the flame will not spread from one to the next. But if you put it into a basket, then shrichin roiv. So basically, Rav Kahana was halfway saying like Rav Chisda and halfway saying like Rav Huna, because by Kanim, he agreed to Rav Huna that if they're not bundled together, then you don't need roiv, and if they're bundled together, you need roiv. And by Garinin, he held like Rav Chisda, where if they're bundled together, you don't need roiv. If they're bundled together, you don't need roiv, and if they're separated, you do. So to Helen Gumar, Tani Rav Yosy. Arba Maduris and Srichin roiv. There's 4 different fuels that you can use for a bonfire that are so flammable, we don't see any need for you to require that they become roiv on fire. Rather, once they catch, we know they're going to go. Shel Zephes. Zephes is pitch, highly flammable. Shel Gofris, sulfur, again, highly flammable. Shel Gvina is cheese, and they say it's like a grease. It's a dairy. It's a grease that's dairy, but again, grease is highly flammable. V'shel revev, and revev is also grease. Rashi, Shuman, and Shaiva, maybe not a dairy grease, a meat grease, but these are all types of grease that will spread the flame fast. The masnisatana, it's basically like a lighter fluid. The masnisatana, afshel kash v'shel gavava, even straw and stubble, the archbro touches. Again, they kindle and burn very quickly and very easily. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Eichum shel Bavel, wood of Bavel, ain't shrichin roiv, doesn't need roiv. So there's something about wood of Bavel that ignites quickly. Masaka for Rabbi Yosef, my heat, what exactly are you referring to when you say Eichum shel Bavel? Elaine is silty. If you're talking about silty, Rashi says what they would do is they would cut their wood into small strips, and that's how they would light fires. It doesn't make sense to say that little strips of wood should be so flammable that the fire spreads like it does with grease. Even a wick, which is really made to burn, and what that is made out of, Rashi says, is made out of veget hatzavula b'shemen. So it's like soaking a wick in lighter fluid. Even that requires that the fire is already spread to right of the wick. So for sure, this wood, surely these wooden strips, which aren't soaked in any type of lighter food, surely they should be dry. So what in the world did Rabbi Yochanan mean when he said Eitim Shabavel don't be dry? Well, Rabbi Yosef, what he means is Shucha da Arza. And Shucha da Arza, Rashi tells us, is it's some type of dried out bark of a tree, and in between the bark and the main trunk, there's this wool, this temer, this fibrous type of material. And that is extremely flammable. So it's that fiber that Rabbi Yochanan was talking about when he said Eitim Shabavel and Shichem Broiv, because it's a highly flammable fiber and it'll light up quickly, even though you only have a little bit of it ignited. Rami Bar Abba Omar, it's Zaza. Zaza, I believe, is some type of moss. Let's see what he says. It says moss. It's some type of moss that was highly flammable. Again, I don't know exactly what these things are. Hadin Allah Yitzis Shabbos, Hadin Allah Yitzis Shabbos, Hadin Allah Yitzis Shabbos. Now we're learning B'Memed Likin. B'Memed Likin talks about the mitzvah of Adlakas Neres and Shabbos. Adlakas Neres and Shabbos, the Arshbook tells you in our Tama that there's multiple reasons why you have to light candles. One is Einik Shabbos. It's a much more enjoyable Shabbos if it's not dark. There's another sheet that it's called Kovet Shabbos. When you come to a meal, a nice meal, there's always going to be some light there. It's not going to be pitch black. And we don't want people tripping. It could lead to shalom bias issues if you're tripping because you can't see where you're going. So that's the importance of fire. And because of that, Chazal were very makbid as to what you use to make this fire, because if the fire wouldn't hold good and it wouldn't be a good fire and you attempted to adjust it or it wouldn't illuminate properly, that wouldn't really serve its purpose. So because of that, Chazal dictated what you're allowed to use both as a wick and what you're allowed to use as a fuel. So let's see what the Mishnah says. With what are you allowed to light? Neres for Shabbos, and with what are you not allowed? So the Mishnah. Now all of these things are things I have no idea what they are. So I'm just going to read their definition from the Art Scroll, although I don't even understand what those terms are anyway, but I'm going to read them anyway. So you cannot light with lechesh. I'll actually move it in so you can see my Art Scroll as well. So you cannot use something called cedar bast. I have no idea what cedar bast is, but it's something from a cedar tree. You cannot use chosin, which is uncarded flax. So it's flax that's not yet fully processed. And not with floss silk. And not with willow bast. And and not with desert fiber. Again, I don't know what all these things are. And not from sea moss, the green stuff that you find in the water. Not with pitch. And not with shaiva, not with wax. Now, of course, we do allow wax nowadays, so the Rishonim say that the wax that we have now is much purer and burns much better than what they had in those days. V'loy b'shem kick, you're not allowed to use shem and kick. I don't know what that is. V'loy b'shem sreifa, and not with oil that must be burned, and the Gemara is going to talk about that later. V'loy b'alya, not with the fat from the tail of a sheep. V'loy b'chelev, and not with other types of chelev. They touch it. Chelev in English is tallow, but it means fat, a hard type of fat. Nacham Hamadi says, Madlikin b'chelev mavush. Once you cook up this chelev and it softens up, you're allowed to use a chelev. That refines it, that now it does burn well, and it's a shaila. If that means only if the chelev remains in liquid form, or even if it re-gels, if it's also considered improved enough that you can use it for fuel to light the candles for Shabbos. It doesn't matter if this chelev is cooked or not cooked. You can never use chelev to light your Shabbos candles. So the Gemara goes through to try to identify a lot of these species, but even with the extra help of the Gemara, still harder for us to relate to it. Because unless it's a product that I could find on the supermarket shelf, it's very hard for me to relate to it. Lechesh. What is lechesh of the Gemara? Shucha da azra. It's the bark of a cedar tree. That's just a piece of wood. How could you use that as a wood? We're not speaking to the actual wood. In between the bark and the trunk, like we just learned at the end of the last parak, there's this fibrous material that burns very well, and that's what I was talking about. So you're not allowed to use that because I guess even though it burns, but the flame doesn't stay smooth, and it could be an issue. You cannot use chosin. What is chosin? Amar Yosy, nu'uras shel pishtan. It's nu'uras shel pishtan, meaning it's when you comb out the pishtan, it's the small little fibers that won't take well to be part of the wick. Amalei Abaye, how could you say that chosin is the nu'uras shel pishtan? The pasuk says vayachashan l'nairis, and the pasuk is talking about figuratively that a strong person will end up being soft, and he'll lose his strength. But it's using flax as the item that we're comparing it to, as the metaphor. So it says vayachashan, the chasan will become the iris. Well, doesn't that prove that chasan is not the iris? Mechlal the chasan lav iris. So you can't learn that chasan means it's those short fibers, because clearly the Nova is saying chasan, which is something stronger, will become like iris. So what is chasan? Amar kisna the daikloi nafis. The way they would process the flax is they would take they were like stems of a plant, and they would smash them, and after they would smash them, they would comb them out. So here we have those stems that were smashed, but were not combed out yet, so they're not properly refined to be a good wick. That's why they're not allowed. You're not allowed to use chalach as a wick for Shabbos candles. Amar, what is this? Shaltini l'chol mechusayama. I asked the people who travel the world and the seven seas if they know what this is. And they told me kulcha shemei. They told me that this is kulcha. What is kulcha? So the Art Scroll says kulcha is its name. Does he say what it is? He says it's a woolly substance found on stones in the sea, and is identified with the cicero's blossom. I don't know what it is. Some type of woolly stuff that you find at the bottom of the sea. I don't know. That's what it is. It's gushkara. Gushkara is a general term that's used to describe a low-grade product. And Rashi elaborates and tells us that it's silk, but it's not silk that the silkworm just spins. Rather, it's the silk that we take out of its cocoon. Once the cocoon is abandoned, we take that silk, which is a lower grade silk, and you make those fibers into a wick. That's what we're talking about when you say kulcha is not allowed to be used as a wick for the Shabbos candles. Ravin v'Abaye. So at this point, we're saying that kelach is a low grade silk. Ravin v'Abaye have a yasik made the Ravin Nechemia achua to Reish Galusa. Ravin and Abaye were sitting in front of Ravin Nechemia, who was a fancy rich guy, because he was the brother of the Reish Galusa. So naturally, he would be dressed up and he would be prestigious. Chazia tavalovish metachsa. He was wearing a beautiful silk beged. Amalei Ravin Abaye. Ravi told Abaye, "Hainu kelach." That is kelach. Meaning, I disagree that kelach is a low grade silk. It's actually a very high grade. It's so high grade that the brother of the Reish Galusa is wearing high grade silk made out of kelach. Amalei Abaye said, we don't actually call this kalach, this beautiful beged that Rav Nechemia is wearing. We call it shira paranda. We call it paranda silk, because shira means silk. We call it paranda silk. That's what we call it. Meisvei. So the Gemara asks the question, Ravin. You, Ravin, want to claim that kalach is not a low grade silk. Rather, it's the high grade silk that would be worn even by Rav Nechemia. Well, I'll prove to you otherwise. Because it says hashiroin. Hashiroin, that is high grade silk. That would describe the begodim that Rav Nechemia was wearing. And it says hashiroin, ve'akalach, ve'asirkin, chayavim betzitzis. So clearly it lists off kalach as a distinct product from shiroin. Now, Rav Nechemia was wearing shiroin. He was wearing silk clothing. So clearly that's not what kalach means. So how could Ravin claim that that's what it means? Shift to the Ravin. Either Ravin is Agush Lavin, and kalach has to be some low grade product that clearly Rav Lechemi was not wearing. Or Ibarisema Shira Lachud, the Shira Parada Lachud. When it says Shirayim, that might not be referring to the Kalach silk, but Shira Paranda is a different type of silk. And it could be that there's two different types of Shirayim, and therefore one of them would be Kalach and one of them might not be Kalach. So at the end of the day, it's a little bit unresolved exactly what type of silk we're talking about, but there's some type of silk that you're not allowed to use as a wick for your Shabbos candles. What is Psilas Idam? Achvina. Again, I don't know what Achvina is. Rashi says it's an arava, and it has in it some type of woolly product between the bark and the actual wood. There is some type of fibrous material that's used. Ravin v'Abaya v'Ka'azla b'Pakse the Tamurisa. They were walking in the valley of Tamurisa. Chazinu lahani arvasa. They saw arvasa. What does arvasa mean? It means they saw aravas. They saw aravas growing. Omale Ravin l'Abaye hainu idon ditna. That's the Psilas Idon that our Mishnah mentioned. Amarle, what are you talking about? Hahi eitz ba'almahu. What we're looking at is a piece of wood, and that's not a wick. So what did he do? What Ravin did was kalaf. He took the piece of wood and he broke it open and he peeled off the bark. And he showed him that I didn't mean the bark of the tree. I meant if you crack it open and you see the fibrous material, that's the Psilas Idon that I meant to point out to you so that you know what the Mishnah is talking about. Shavra, that means shavra. Does Rashi say what shavra is? Min esav orach, urtia, some type of long grass that can be formed into a wick. The green moss, mahi, what exactly is it? If you're going to say it's the moss that grows in cracks in the rocks and such. Rashi's mokum kinus mayim and godalem between your rock breakers. It has like this moss growing on these cracks. Well, the fruchim mifrachim, those I don't need the Mishnah to tell me that I can't make a wick out of those. Physically, it would be impossible to form a wick out of that. It would crumble and fall apart in your hands. It wouldn't even work. Alamar Papa, uchmasa arba. It's referring to if you have a boat that's parked in port, it starts to build up moss, bigger, thicker green moss, and it's that moss that you could make a wick out of that the Mishnah is telling you should. Tana, we learned in the Brisa that in addition to the list in our Mishnayos that you cannot use as wicks, they added more to the list. The Sifel shall tzemer of wool, they shall sar, and of hair. The Tanvidon, why did our Tana not see the need to mention those? Because tzemer michvitz kavitz, you couldn't use it for a wick even if you tried. When you light it, it just will shrink up and shrivel. It won't light. It won't take to a flame. So I don't need the Mishnah to tell me you can't use it. If you try, it won't work. And sar the same thing with hair. If you try lighting up hair, it's just going to burn the hair, but it's not going to actually take hold of a flame. So we know nobody's going to use it to light because if they try, it won't work. Now we're getting into talking about the fuels that are allowed to be used or not allowed to be used for Shabbos candles. Zephes zipsa, it's pitch, and shaiva is kirusa, it's the wax that comes from the honeycomb. Tana, we learned atkan psul psilos. Until now, we were talking about wicks that are not qualified to be used on Shabbos. But the end of the list of the Mishnah is psul shmein, and we're talking about fuel sources that are not. Make more pshita. We know as Ephes, we know these things are fuel sources. The more shaiva strichly. The Mishnah needs to tell us about shaiva. You might think that even if you form a candle out of the wax, you wouldn't be able to use it. Kamash Malon, that a candle that you form out of wax, you could use. The wax that we say you can't use is if you put wax in a container and you stick a wick into it, there it won't burn well. But if you build a tall wick and you put wax around it, which is how we construct our candles, in fact, that could be used. Amar Rabbi Bar Avin, atarna psulta desifta. Atarna is a chemical that oozes out when you burn or when you, says it's the residue of pitch. I'm not sure how you get that residue out, but it's a clear resinous byproduct obtained through the heat employed in the distillation of pitch. So if you heat it up, you're going to get a clear liquid out of it, which is called itron, which I believe is also not allowed. And then you have Shiva wax is psulta dedufsha. That is the psilas of the honey, I guess because that's what the honeycomb is made out of. Lamai nafkamina. What's the difference in halacha about what these things are? So to Gemara, lemekach umemkar, meaning leman demasni lemizmin Shiva. If you go to a merchant and you make a deal with him that you're buying wax from him, leisav lepsulta dedufsha. He can give you the broken honeycombs because that's considered wax. That is legally considered wax. And that's what the Mishnah is telling. That's what the Gemara is telling us, that this wax is called wax for commerce, and if you buy it and you pay for it, that's what you get. Okay, we're done. I hope everyone's ignited from all these different fires that we learned about today. It's a little bit boring because we don't relate to any of these things. They're just giving us a list of stuff and we don't even know what they are.
Sorry, yes, I forgot.
Does anyone know what time it is?
Sorry?
7:10.
7:10?
Yep.
So we have some time to daven.
You sure with that? 7:10? I thought you said it was 7:08.
7:10. 7:10.
No, whoever said 7:08 yesterday was a mistake. It was 7:11 yesterday.
No, okay. I couldn't tell how I jumped I jumped 4 minutes in one day. Okay.
Yosy, sorry, I forgot. What's the reason why we can't use all these things? What's the problem with them?
Because the flames don't carry well, and they jump on the wick and they flicker, so they don't produce a good flame.
Okay.
But by Machal ben Destroy, usually we don't make a halacha based on the preferences of one person. So why in this case do we set that, if nobody else would eat food cooked only to a third, why does that become the normative halacha? Normally we would say he's unusual case. Here we're saying that becomes the basis.
So that's an excellent question. I was thinking about that, and I don't think.
No, I think they were just using it as an example to see how far it wasn't because of him. They were just trying to use him as an example. This is how far it can be cooked, or how much something can be cooked.
But I think he's asking. Nobody would be happy that way. People want it to be more cooked.
Oh,
yeah.
So I think the answer is of course. But the question is, once it's at that point before Shabbos, then you won't have the urge to spike up the flame because it's far enough along the way that by the time you're ready to eat it, it'll be fully cooked.
It's a kula. What are you complaining about?
No,
I know.
Listen, I mean, it's the normative halacha. I'm not suggesting we change it. I'm just trying to understand. Normally, we would say we don't go by a yachid. I like it like this. Okay, but the Rov Ha'am says not like you. So normally we go by the Rov, and we say, what does a normal person want? That's how we normally poskin when we have something that's about preferences. Here we're saying we've got one guy who's a bandit, who's always on the run. He'll eat stuff that's a third cooked. So if it's good for him, it's good for everybody. It just seems a little bit strange.
Right. And that's why I thought that no one's actually eating it, but it's just far enough along the way that we can rely that it'll get fully cooked later on. I assume that's medium rare. Like whenever someone says, I want a steak medium rare, I say, what are you, a gangster?
No,
this sounds like blood rare.
Blood rare. Okay, geweldig.
Okay.
All right.
Have a wonderful day.
Good and chaydish.
Oh, Duffy, you're davening Hal today, right?
Supposedly.
We're very excited. We're very excited.
Okay.
Okay. Do we get a sneak preview on the
No, I'm having an argument with Akiva. He says if there's too much noise, he's going to mute everybody. I said you can't mute everybody. It's like you giving shir and you don't hear anybody. Right? It's like I'm davening to myself. Not only that, when you daven in shul, you hear the oilam, so you know when to start.
He just needs to mute the people who think they have good voices.
Oh, trust me.
I don't know.
All right. See you soon.
See you.
Okay.
Okay, sure.
Bye-bye.